Everybody. Hi
Hi,
Ramya, how are you?
I'm good. How are you, Shweta?
I'm very good, doing really well. Yeah. Hey, so how do you want to take on the topic for today? The topic for today is last time we discussed about what is identity, why is it relevant, how did it even come into play, how the post Second World War era kind of set us up for the rise of the individual identity, right? And today we talk about a narrow facet of the individual identity at some level, the work identity. And we speak about the rise and rise and rise of the work identity. So much, at least in urban societies and urbanized lives like ours, um, so much of how we define ourselves comes just from work, right? So much of our mind space goes just to work. So I think let's spend some time talking about that. What do you think?
Yeah. In fact, I really like the way you said rise and rise and rise. That feels like a takeover. So
Yeah,
that's what, it's taken over all the other identities or all other ways of being and doing. And not always, but when it takes over, and that's what we're going to talk about. It's,
yeah,
yeah, at
yeah.
least for for people like us, right? A certain strata of society and a certain strata of education and professionals.
And I think that broadly holds true for the Western world and for a lot of the westernized,
Yeah,
uh,
westernized, right? That's
westernized part of the Asian world as well.
yeah.
As westernization sets in, one of the sort of elements of it, along with the rise of the individual identity, is the takeover of the work identity, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm probably jumping ships here, but when you mention Western and Westernized, I'm just also reminded of the whole collectivistic versus individualistic societies and
Hmm.
the very fact that what we are seeing as the saliency of a professionalized identity, which is a specific form of individual identity, is also coming from the individualistic, the most individualistic cultures, and then, of course, finding its way into our
Yeah.
lives and work. So
So
let's, yeah,
go ahead. Sorry. Hey, I just wanted to, yeah, if you're okay, I want to take a couple of minutes talking about how this evolution has happened, right? I was doing a little bit of research, and if you go back to the times of the hunter gatherer, which was pretty much, if you on a time clock, almost 23 hours and 50 minutes if human civilization has existed for 24 hours. That's pretty much been most of our existence, right? The hunter gatherer period. And that, by the very nature of it, because some people hunted, some people gathered, you needed each other for survival. Work was a means of survival in that period, right? And essentially, work is just, and community is how you kind of survive. So I think from that extreme, then, of course, the agrarian systems where status becomes important, specialization of tasks becomes important. There's a beginning of a work identity. People begin to get known for what they do, but very much a community is still important. And then comes the industrialization era, right? About 200 to 50 years ago. And then people begin to migrate for work. Work migration becomes a thing. And that's when those communities begin to break up and people start resettling in new places. And so in my head, it is like if the individual, family, community, and society are like concentric circles, at the beginning of humankind and work is somewhere at the periphery, slowly you see work sort of beginning to come in. And now in the modern era, it is like the camel that has taken over the tent, right? The work is in the center, with the individual identity, and then everything else has shrunk a little bit. The sense of family has shrunk, sense of community has shrunk, sense of society has shrunk. And that is actually, while it started in the industrialized era, it has surely, in my own lifetime, I feel that it has changed. And maybe it's come to India later, post, liberalization. But it's certainly a more recent phenomenon. And you can see, and like we spoke last time, it coincides with individualism, the sense of an individual identity, and that's not a coincidence. Work does reward the individual more than anybody else. Your sense of identity, I mean, it tells you how great you are and what you do is amazing. So those two sort of come up together as well, right? And now I think it's at a point where I don't think we are complete without, forget being complete. We first, when someone asks, what do you do? Inevitably, 9 out of 10 of us first start with what we do at work, right?
Yeah. And not just what you do, but who you are. And that's
Yeah.
such a touchy point for me because it's like, who are you? And the introduction usually starts with, I am what I do professionally, right? It's been a sore point always and continues to be. And Shweta, I'm just going to put that sore point aside and go back to the picture that you painted because I thought it was beautiful about, yeah, about society, about life in the caveman's time, right? And then family and the relationships, and then, of course, the individual. And then work is something you do in order to survive and be part of the whole thing. And again, the Arab and the camel metaphor was great, how it's come in, come in, come in. And now it's like you are what you do, and then you have relationships and family around that. And it starts even earlier, right? It starts even very early. And then, of course, you have the community, if at all. Nowadays, the sense of community is just also many places it's not there. In my own life, there have been pockets where I lived in certain places where it was just work and family, and I didn't have a community. So, yeah, and the rest of it is actually an iffy thing, if at all, which is quite sad. So let's look at that takeover, and let's look at yeah, what it's doing to us and our lives and to society actually, because the effects of this, I don't think it's just on the self. Of course, I mean, we can use the same three buckets that you, or concentric circles that you painted so beautifully, right? We can look at the effects on the self. We can look at the effects on relationships and family units, and even one-on-one relationships, like, husband, wife, parent, child, all of that, siblings, everything. And then we can also look at the effect on society itself and community.
Tell me one thing, Ramya, we are both professionals. And the reason why this came to me was I realized over time how much of myself I have sort of defined with my work, right? How
Mhm.
do you think it has showed up for you? Of course, you work very hard to kind of have these multiple identities, but in your own life, if you were to think of work as your primary identity, or people that you have seen who play out their primary identity, how do you think it shows up for them in terms of how they live? How do you think it manifests?
So I'll take that in two parts, really, right? One about me, and two because I work with people, and which is what I've seen with others. For me, there's actually a historical context here. Now, I have multiple identities, and I'm playing with them. So even here, you see, and then these aren't the only ones, but I like to have these up there in here, right? As I wander through life. But there was a time when professional identity it was it, and it crumbled. It didn't work for me, and this was soon after my MBA, when it was so big and it was the huge thing, and it broke down for me, or I broke it down, and I and it was horrible because with the breakdown of that one singular identity that had been worshipped for, praised for, got all the positive validation for, breaking that felt like dying in some ways, right? And So that's also, it's coming from a sense of never again am I going to put myself in a situation like that, where just because one identity either crumbles or it has to be let go of, I choose to dissolve it. And it can happen both ways, right? Never again am I going to feel a sense of I don't exist or I'm dying. So in some
And
ways,
it's a very important point. I want you to hold on to that. We'll
yeah,
come back to that later. But the idea of how fragile we are without that one identity, right?
yeah,
I think that's an important, yeah. And
yeah.
how else did it show up for you in your life in terms of your choices, decisions?
Um, I think it keeps showing up, right? So one of the things, what I like to look at is, I like to look at identity or self-image as a platform and not a prison, because very soon it can become a cage and a prison. But and without it, again, there's like, we're just wandering. We can't just be the air. We need an identity, so we need to function. There are lots of, so literally that platform, a foundation from which you can function. And nobody says you have to function only from one foundation or one platform, right? So foundation sounds too as if it has to be one, but think of it like stages, right? You can stand, deliver, and do your thing from multiple stages. So that's how I start looking at it. But none of those stages are me. And it's not that I'm inside the stage, I'm on the stage. Therefore, I can go from one to another. Um, yeah, the second part about other people, do you want to take that later? Why don't you share about yourself first, and then we can talk about the people we were.
No, I've been reflecting on it. I mean, I'm also turning 50 this year, and I've been reflecting on the various things that I've sort of traded off in order to continue to feel like a professional or to feel like an entrepreneur, right? I think one of the things that I traded off was family size, right? I and I think that's a global trend now. You will see declining populations, etc. You see that everywhere that hey, childcare is work, you know, and with two people working and in the nuclear setups that we have because
And
we
the
moved for
absence
work,
of community, which
right?
is
And the
very
absence
critical.
of community because we've migrated for work and and we've not invested in community and we live these nuclear lives. Uh, what has happened is we I ended up having one kid, right? I would have liked to have more in hindsight, but at that time it didn't feel like, I mean, there was only so much space that I could devote to this thing outside of this
Yeah, yeah.
big thing in the room, which was my work identity, right? So that was one way. The other thing is we have moved so much for my husband's work, you know. Um, that means that we're not embedded in any community. We have relationships on the internet and on the phone and cities, and we have friends around the world. We are not embedded in any community. If something were to happen to either of us, maybe some friends from another city or a handful of friends in the same city might show up. But I remember when my grandfather passed away and we were in Baroda, my parents had lived in one city for 23 years, you know. Although they had also moved for work, but they cultivated a community so that there was a lot of social support for that. That somebody's taking care of the cremation, somebody's doing something else. You're not alone when bad things are happening. There are people around you because you've invested in them. You are rooted. You built that support, right? And I find that in my generation, and at least for people like us who moved a lot for work, that is a compromise we've made. We don't have that in our lives at all, right?
You don't have that. Also, I resonate completely with you on that. So another person who chose to have just one child because of, yeah, just don't have the space and energy and bandwidth, and you can't have it all. That said, I resonate also with the community thing, because I found it really difficult when I was bringing up my son for at least the first 3 years when I was in UK. And I tried a lot about, with whatever in the apartment that I lived. I started this mums network, and yes, but it's still about just a once a week play date and stuff like that. It's not the kind of community that I grew up in. So I remember in the flats and community system where we grew up, it was just like all the kids used to be walking in and out of multiple houses, eating what multiple aunties cooked. And then there were always, elder kids somewhere. If my mom had to go somewhere, I would just like, there was always like five, six different places, houses that she could leave me in, and there would always be people. So it's like a floating population, and it doesn't tax anybody. It's not like you have to call up somebody exactly and say, are you free in this time, and can you watch my kid? And it's so beautiful. So I really believe in the power of community for childcare. And of course, when the times are tough, it's again it's insubstitutable, substitutable. And it's really important to plan for those tough times, because I am someone who cannot take a lot of stress, especially, so I'm sort of, one of the things is I always have buffers. I always keep slack in my schedule should somebody fall ill. It's not always just should I fall ill, right? Should somebody need me? And I think that also takes away from the time that I can devote to a full, because I'm a freelancer, I have a portfolio career, I can do all that. Had I been in a corporate world, in the corporate world with a boss, with a normal 9 to 5, I don't think I could have had these buffers that I keep for myself. And again, going in a community, you sort of don't need that much of buffer, because it's like the insurance companies, right? It's like, what if somebody is not going to fall ill in everybody's house at the same time? So the community pulls in. uh, yeah, I think the cost, I digress, but yeah, on that, coming back to the identity, I think one of the costs of having this very singular identity is it it begins to strain our relationships, because
Yeah.
now it's all the, if I may say, almost like the both of us went to IMA, right? So the MANAC, the debit, credit, and all, right? The tallying of those two things, which typically happens in a community wise or family wise, is now happening in the individual. So now the individual, each one of us has to be extremely self-aware, manage our time, manage our resources, manage our energy, everything. And then see, now how can I manage my relationships, how can I look after people? And of course, it's mutual. I know people look after, but we're still managing those relationships. In which fact, there was this beautiful HBR article that yeah, one of my professors from LBS, I forget his name, I think it's Rob Goffey and another person. It's called it's like resilience, about, it's about cultivating a resilience network, where very intentionally we are creating these relationships that still work, that makes us, holds us.
And the other thing that struck me is that if you see the rise of sort of the culture of divorce and the culture of, is that because we expect so much from our partners, right? And we expect so much from our partners because this entire extended network that is supposed to fulfill various needs for us has gone away, right?
Yes.
Right?
So for our listeners, this wasn't pre-planned that I'm going to say
No.
yes, yes, and agree with what Shweta
Yeah.
said. I totally agree.
Yeah. So I think so it manifests in terms of stressed out relationships. It manifests in terms of, not having time with family. It means that we are not available. We are on schedule. When even when someone's ill, we are like, hey, I'm free between 5 and 6. Can I come and see you? Not when they need us, but when I'm free to go, right?
Yeah.
Because work has taken up that central space that pretty much prevents us from being there even for ourselves. Our healths are compromised. And it started with us not being available for broader communities. So we don't participate in community activities, we don't contribute, we don't build communities. Then it stopped with saying, hey, I don't have the time to attend a family wedding because, hey, I have work.
Yeah.
And so then now it's come down to the immediate family. If you see the generation below us, people are not there's a rise in single person households even in India now.
Yeah.
People are not having children because work has taken over all that space,
Yeah.
right? Work has taken over. So I think that's how it manifests. And what do you think are the, shall we move to the consequences? How do you think? I think we are both on the same page on that. We both believe it takes a toll, right?
Yes.
Right?
And I mean, here's the thing. I think singular work identities also take a toll on the career itself.
Huh.
So, as someone who helps people, craft their careers, when it comes to transitioning from one career to another, or when it comes to, giving yourself a break or experimenting, or even, branching out into a portfolio career. So I can talk about myself actually, and then talk about how I help other people. So I transition many times each time in
Hmm.
my career, right? So each time you have to leave behind that old career and then go into the new one. And when that old career is very strong and very singular, it's difficult. It's difficult. It's like literally like you have to, put your ego down, or you have to shatter your ego, or you have to get very spiritual and say, I am not my ego. And just to follow your heart, just to do something you love, just to do something you feel curious about. You can feel that calling, you can feel
Yeah.
that, you can feel that.
Yeah, like you just want to go have fun. You just want to go,
Yeah.
you want to take 3 weeks off or a month off and go to a painting camp or go to a yoga camp. And then you're like, oh, am I wasting my life? Am I doing this? Am I doing that? Am I being unprofessional? Am I being, you
Yeah.
know, all of those things as well, right?
And it need not just be a vacation, it can be the next career also.
It could
So
be a next career, yeah.
when I started coaching, right, as a professor, I already had about 10 years of experience. And so therefore I built a certain level of, what do you call it, performance, right? Now as a coach, I was completely new, so completely raw, completely bad, because most of us begin any new thing in a completely bad place. And now the ego is like, but you're so good here. And now you're so bad here. But then you want to do this, and you have to give yourself time to grow, grow, grow. And so, this ego is now like, this identity is tied to this ego and say, but I am so great. But I'm not so great here. So it's tough. It's tough to even follow your heart when it comes to work.
So that's a fascinating thing that even within your singular identity, it prevents you. But I also feel like for me, like one
It's
of the
singular
consequences,
because it's different. It's like within work, it's different. Like a
yeah,
professor is different from a coach. So it's
yeah.
actually different.
And for me, actually, interestingly, like, and I want to kind of talk about that a little bit, is there is this whole mental health epidemic, right? And I was personally like for the first 10, 12 years of my life, when I was, oh, I'm this hardcore professional, I have to make it, I have to become this, I have to become that. That actually ended for me when I got clinical depression, right? I was in Thailand, I was the mother of a kid. Like I said, there was stress relationships. And that was my wake up call. That was my wake up call that this way of being doesn't work, right? It for me. So I think, and then if you see the stats around mental health, right? As much as there's a direct correlation between a rise of mental health issues and capitalism and industrialization. There's a direct correlation. It is not even indirect. Any society that is deeply industrialized, westernized, you will find that there is a rise of mental health issues, right? It's a direct correlation. And that is because so much of, because we don't have to, in order to retain, if you see the world's largest study on happiness, literally the only thing that defines happiness is deep relationships,
Yes,
right?
yes, yeah.
And when you are so focused on work, you're not investing in anything other than what is actually a transaction. Work is actually a transaction, right? You're getting paid money and you're getting that, but it's actually, you do work, you get money at the end of it. I mean, except for those of us who kind of work in portfolio careers, most of the time, what happens is then in that transaction, you've invested so much of yourself, it's often at the cost of other things.
Yeah.
There's loneliness. Like I said, there's an impact on families. There's, all of those things are. important factors, right?
I don't want to sound like I'm doing this westernized thing,
Mhm.
bashing them, but I just want to build on something you talked about as work as a transaction, right?
Hmm.
That idea actually has also come from the West. And I'm not at all a person who says everything in India is great and all. Okay, I think like we have lots of um, things problematic in our own culture, but one of the things that I think we had good in our culture was this idea of work is worship. Now, of course, for atheists, you can replace it with anything else. You could call it like my husband's an atheist. So, how this would translate for him is work is it could be self expression or art or, yeah, and, following what he likes to do. So, because he's a researcher and teacher, that's his following his curiosity, right? Following your passion. But I'm going to go back to this idea of work is worship or, following your art or passion or you're doing something or your dharma, right? That is not transactional. And again, don't want to sound like I'm quoting the Gita as a fanatic because I'm not a fanatic, but I really love that one verse in the Gita that says, you have a right over your effort, but not the outcome. Because and that's been like the one of the single guiding principles that I keep using to really enjoy my work and not let it trap me. And I think that is something very non-transact. It's a very non-transactional way of relating with our work, which we had in our culture, which we lost. And bringing it back to identity, the other thing that's not there is that you're not the doer, you're the channel. And I use that. I use that all the time, right? When I teach, when I write, when I as a poet, I'm like I'm a channel. I'm the vehicle. I'm the instrument. That's also something very deeply embedded in our culture. So then what
And
happens?
that requires you to, at some level, reduce your ego in terms of your own individual identity.
Identity, exactly. So there's a loosening, there's a decoupling. So with that, these transitions then also become easy. Okay, yesterday I was a channel for this, but I'm a channel for this. It's not such a big thing that I am this. So yeah, we had some nicer ways of dealing with work.
So let's quickly talk about. I mean, we've been bashing about the rise of the individual identity. It's, the loss of social scaffolding, and how in many ways things that, like, we would have elders in the family and groups that you would learn from. There's informal mentoring, and all of that has now been replaced by formal. So if you see a rise of the lot of the recent, like, care services, so to speak, are all trying to replace what family and community was supposed to do.
Yeah.
But having said that, there are obviously benefits. The reason it still survives is there's obviously a lot of benefit because of that as well. Right? So one of the benefits clearly is, I think this is the most productive, innovative period in history because large groups of people are able to come together to create things, right? And they're able to work so hard at it to make that happen. So I think society as a whole benefits a lot
The
from this.
marketplace. The
Hmm?
job marketplace really benefits from
Yeah,
identity, right?
yeah,
Think
yeah.
of it. You can't have a job marketplace without CVs, without resumes, without having those taglines. So, so yes, so that way it helps the economy, it helps the job market, it helps the efficiency of mobility of skills and expertise
Right?
within that
And
creation.
prosperity, it is a route to prosperity creation. It has created prosperity in general at a social economic prosperity. I won't call it well-being,
I was
economic prosperity, right? So
yeah.
we are. I mean, there are. I mean, obviously, none of us would, in spite of all the benefits of the hunter-gatherer life, I don't think any of us is going to want to go back to that, right?
No, but I don't mind a little more of community.
Right? Yeah,
Especially, I want community for the 30-year-old Ramya when she gave birth. Even
yeah,
now, actually, I mean, even now, it's not like caregiving ends after.
yeah. Right. So I think that's one of the benefits. I think the other sort of benefit is, obviously, I can't imagine you and I doing this in another era. right? So there is benefits to having that individual identity, individual self-expression. All of that is at its peak right now. And so
Yeah.
we do all, without that, we wouldn't be here even having this conversation, right?
And independence.
Independence, right?
It's all like id, right? Like the identity, independence. But yeah, I mean, and I think it helps, right? Because of that identity and the independence, and people can walk out of situations when they feel abusive, oppressive, and all of that. Which when I actually I'm not so
I think
sure.
there is a message, huh?
Sorry.
The questions that we've not been listening to.
I haven't expanded that. Okay, shall we say that? Okay, but yeah, so very quickly, I mean, to wrap up that point
Hmm.
on walking out of abusive systems, I don't know if it was easier or less easy when we were tight knit communities. I mean, because I haven't lived as part of that, but I can imagine a downside and an upside that, if there was a situation of abuse, I would imagine that the rest of the community could step in, but I'm not sure they always would step in. So people might also have felt more trapped.
I
So
think
let's.
Manleen has asked about the idea of a hybrid, and that's exactly what we're going to talk about the next time, Manleen. Today, we just wanted to speak about the rise of the individual identity. There are some pros to it, but broadly from a societal, and I read this beautiful line that if you see societies or nations are actually wealthier and better off because of the current sense of work identity, but individuals are worse off, right? For most individuals, at an individual level, are lonelier. They have less support. They feel more alone. They have more fragile sense of selves. Remember when you spoke about that whole breakdown, right? And my own, and I have known family members to have mental breakdowns when careers collapse, right? So a very fragile sense of self. uh, Even like when you have ups and downs, I mean, the community or families or extended families would protect us. Like you lose a job, you would have people to. Now I think younger people today don't have that support system. They don't have, there are shocks in life and careers.
Yeah, that's
People
the.
are less able to take that because there's just less of a scaffolding even at a family level. Families are smaller, families are more fragmented. So all of those are sort of the things. And I think the answer to that, and I think people are sort of coming up with it, 4-day work weeks, a little bit more balance, finding a ways to have like a not and always on kind of culture. And I think what we want to talk about is obviously not just systemic changes, but how do we sort of actively work towards building this multiple identity life? And what does that do to our individual sense of self? Manveen, thanks for that question. We'll totally ask about that. We'll totally address that next time. Yeah. Is there anything else you want to tell Ramya as we wind down today?
No, I think we're good. And just in terms of the hybrid identity, I think we also talked about that in one of our earlier podcasts. So I just wanted to put a link there where, yeah,
Hmm.
we did cover that, but we'll
Yeah, yeah,
definitely
we spoke about that in our
very
episode
first
number 2, but we'll
introduction.
come back to. I think our entire next episode is dedicated to just that. So
That.
I think we do want to kind of spend a little bit more time on the importance of it, how it anchors people. There are cons to it, of course. In a world where obviously, people with a singular identity, and Elon Musk is going to end up probably doing a lot more than someone who spends time with family, right?
Next time. Yeah, let's
Yeah,
put that
we'll
into
talk about
next
it next
time.
time. There are pros and
Yeah,
cons to
yeah.
that.
I don't think there are too many cons, but let's see. We'll do
Yeah,
this next time.
yeah. Okay. Chalo, great.
Okay. Bye bye.
Bye.